Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatguru. Gita Sugita Kartavya Kimanyehi Shastra Vistaraihi Yaswayam Padmanabhasya Mukapadma Vinishtha Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantraha Tasya Namani Yani Karma Pyekam Tasya Devasya Seva Sarvopanishado Gavaha Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Arto Vatsaha Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Geetamritam Mahat. Sannyasasya Mahabaho Tattvamichhami Veditu Yagasya cha Rishikesha Pritakkeshi Nishodhana. The first shloka of the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's question to Krishna. The summary of all summaries. The 18th chapter begins with a very profound question. Incidentally, this question of Arjuna happens to be his 18th question in the Gita. The 18th chapter of the Gita begins with Arjuna's 18th question. Another divine coincidence. As we all know, the Gita is a conversation between Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, and Arjuna. It is a conversation nested within a conversation. Conversation between Dhritarashtra and Sanjaya, within which we get to relish the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. It is Krishna-Arjuna Samvada. Arjuna speaks 84 verses in the Gita. Krishna speaks 574 verses. Of the remaining 42, 41 are spoken by the great Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra also has a role in the Gita. One verse, the very first verse, is spoken by Dhritarashtra. Before we begin our deep dive into the 18th chapter of the Gita, we need to look at how the Krishna-Arjuna Samvada progressed right from the beginning. The 18th question of Arjuna is preceded by 17 questions. We need to be thankful to Arjuna. It is because of Arjuna's questions that we get to relish the quintessential wisdom of the Upanishads through Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Arjuna, of the 84 verses that he spoke, the bulk of the verses that he spoke happens to be in the very first chapter. Krishna is silent throughout the first chapter. He lets Arjuna speak. Arjuna is overpowered by an unfamiliar territory of uncertainty. And he is shaken. He is in grief. And in a state of grief, he continuously speaks throughout the first chapter, and Arjuna let him speak. And Arjuna asks the very first question in the second chapter. So out of the 18 questions of Arjuna, the first question happens in the second chapter of the Gita. Karpanya dosho upakatas subhavaha prachavidvam dharma sammoda cheta Restrain nichitam bruhitan me sishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. The second question of Arjuna also happens in the same chapter of the Gita, second chapter. Sita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava tithadi kim prabhasheta kimasita prajeta kim. And immediately the third chapter begins with Arjuna's third question. Jayasi karmana chet bata buddhir janadhana tatkin karmani ghore ma niyojayasi keshava. So we need to understand Arjuna as a question, as an ideal Shishya. Through the questions of Arjuna, we get to understand how Arjuna was unashamed in submitting himself to seek answers. Arjuna was seeking clarity all the time, sometimes repeatedly asking the same question in different ways. We also see Arjuna asking Krishna for more clarity, even telling Krishna that, hey, I am not clear, you are confusing me, you better clarify. We also see Arjuna asking for practical tips. How do I put this into practice? The profound philosophy that you are teaching me, how do I put that into practice? So therefore, from Arjuna, we can learn the characteristics of an ideal Shishya. How to seek answers. Arjuna has the knowledge of his ignorance. And when one has knowledge of one's ignorance and can articulate it in a way to seek answers, then one can move from a state of ignorance to a state of supreme knowledge. Arjuna's journey is a journey from confusion to clarity, from delusion to devotion. And this journey happens because of Arjuna's eagerness to know the answers. So the 18 questions that Arjuna asks are very significant. When we understand Arjuna's questions, the context and the content of the questions, we get to see Gita's pattern and the progress and the structure. And we also get to see how Krishna also guides Arjuna to ask the right questions at the right time. Arjuna's very first question is paramount. It is the question which defines and drives the entire narrative. It is important to know how to frame our questions. If we have to seek right answers, the questions also have to be right. But Arjuna is also fortunate because Krishna enables him to reach a state where he can ask the right questions. Throughout the first chapter, Arjuna was not in a state to talk anything meaningful. Krishna, with his characteristic smile, ensures that Arjuna is assured. It is the trust that Arjuna has in Krishna that enables him to collect himself and start asking the right questions. Arjuna talks about death and mortality. Krishna calmly answers about life and immortality. This is the beauty of the way the conversation begins. Arjuna is focused on death, destruction, and mortality and impermanence. Krishna guides him to look at the larger perspective of life and immortality. And Arjuna then reaches a state where he can ask the right question. Karpanya dosho upahata svavaha prichavitvam dharma sammuda chetaha yashrehasyan nistitam bruhitan me sishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. The very first question of Arjuna in the Gita. A very, very profound question. Paramount to the very narrative of the Gita. Arjuna is very clear. He does not know what to do. He does not know what is the right thing to do. And therefore, he looks at Krishna. Hey Krishna, you alone can instruct. You alone can instruct to me what is best for me. So Arjuna's question here, we need to look at the way Arjuna frames his question. Arjuna straight away does not ask, hey Krishna, should I fight this war or should I not fight this war? That was not the question. That comes later. The very question is, hey Krishna, I do not understand what my duty is. I am overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by karpanya dosha. My mind is not at peace. Therefore, I'm unable to make any decisions. I submit to you. You alone can instruct to me what I should do, what is right for me, and what is the best for me. Arjuna asks this question in such a way that it is not restrictive in nature. It is not a question that he asks specific to the context he is in. And this allows Krishna to expand on, and thus we see the flow of nectarine timeless wisdom. Krishna takes that opportunity to address not Arjuna, but address humanity and bestow wisdom that is applicable in countless number of contexts. Krishna transforms the battlefield into a classroom and bestows wisdom that is not just applicable on the battlefield in that specific context, but is applicable in every imaginable context in our life and living. What is my duty? No, Arjuna starts with asking this question, what is dharma? I do not understand dharma. I do not know what to do. I do not know what is the right thing to do. What is best for me? At a broad level, this is the question that Arjuna asks. Now, when we attempt to solve a mathematical question, which involves, let's say, hundreds of steps, and then we are struggling to solve, it is very important to know that the very first step matters. If we get the first step wrong, we will only keep struggling to solve. Unless and until we retrace and go all the way back and get the first step right, we cannot solve the problem. So Arjuna's question what is the right thing to do requires retracing and going back to the fundamentals. Unless the fundamentals are addressed, it is impossible to get the right answer to the question. In order to determine what is the right thing to do, it is very important to address several other questions. The question, what is the right thing to do, requires answers to several other fundamental questions. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? How am I here? Whose am I? Where am I? Where I should be? Why am I here? All these questions need answers. If we have no clear answers to these questions, it's very difficult to determine what is the right thing to do. Even in our mundane context, even in, forget about the spiritual context, even if we look at the material context, if I need to determine the right thing to do, I need to have answers to some of these questions. So therefore, when Arjuna asks this question, what is the right thing to do, Krishna helps him basically retrace and go back, just like how when somebody is struggling at the 11th or 12th step of a mathematical equation, mathematical sum, the teacher guides one to go back to the first step instead of struggling at the 20th step or 30th step. Retracing and going back, Krishna enables Arjuna to retrace and go back to ask the fundamental question on what is your identity and what is your destiny. You have to know the answers to these questions here, Arjuna. Who are you and where you need to be? Where are you and where you need to be? What is your identity and what is your destination, your destiny? If you do not understand your identity, and if you do not understand your destiny, you will not get the right answer to your question, what is the right thing to do? Arjuna has a mistaken identity. He identifies himself with his body. And therefore, as long as the mistaken identity prevails, whatever he tries to get the answer to the question, what is the right thing to do, he will not get the right answer to the question. So therefore, right in the second chapter, in order to answer Arjuna's first question, Krishna dives deep into answering the question, who am I? He also takes the opportunity to briefly talk about answering the question, where am I? What am I? What is the difference between who am I and what am I? Who am I refers to trying to understand the identity. What am I refers to understanding the duties that I perform, the actions that I perform, how the outside world sees what I do. Krishna also answers the question, what am I? He also answers the question, how am I here? And why am I here? Eventually later in the Gita, he also will answer the question, whose am I? Arjuna, therefore, by asking that very first question on what is Dharma, also opens up for the conversation to become expansive in nature, because Dharma means duty. Dharma means way of life. Dharma means essential nature. Dharma means intrinsic nature. Dharma is order. Dharma is flow. Dharma is means. Dharma is goal. Dharma is purpose. By asking that very question, I do not understand Dharma, Arjuna also opens up the conversation and gives an opportunity to Krishna to address dharma in detail. And the answer to the question, who am I, is about addressing dharma in the context of our essential nature. Dharma addressing in the context of our intrinsic nature. Ajo nityah shashvatoyam puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Najayate mayate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavitavana puyaha. Ajo nityah shashvataha puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire. In order to answer the question, who am I? Krishna categorically states, hey Arjuna, we are not human beings with the need to go on a spiritual journey. We are spiritual beings on a human journey. Ajaha, nityaha, shashvataha, puranaha. He differentiates between the body, which is ever-changing and which is impermanent, and the soul, the Atman, which is never change, which is changeless, which has no birth, which has no death, which can never be killed, which is ancient, which is always existent, has no birth, no death. So thus, straight away, Krishna expands the perspective and talks about the immortality of Arjuna. The Atman in Arjuna is immortal, eternal. So therefore, there is no need to grieve. There is no need to lament. The first segment of the second chapter is devoted to addressing Arjuna's first question. Addressing Arjuna's first question of what is my essential nature? Differentiating my essential nature, the nature of the Atman from the body. And Arjuna also takes up, when he asks this question on, I understand I am different from the body. With this understanding, how should I conduct myself? That should be the natural question. Dharma, the essential nature is understood. My essential nature, I am the Atman, I am not the body. But now, having this understanding, what should be my dharma, my duty? It is the next level, next dimension of understanding dharma. Therefore, Krishna takes up addressing Arjuna's question on understanding what should be one's duty. At the very moment we say duty is very confusing. What is my duty? What is your duty? If we analyze, we have several duties. A duty is nothing but a role that we play. Any duty is a role that is played faithfully based on a given script. This is what Krishna calls Swadharma. Swadharma mapichaveksha navikampitu dharmadi yuddhachreyonyat kshatriyasya navidyate. It's a very important principle to understand. The definition of duty and how we execute our duty. We all are constantly relating to the world. We cannot stop relating to this world. Our life and living is driven by our relationships with people and objects. We are constantly relating. When we say we are constantly relating to this world, then naturally there are two parts in this relationship, two components. The I, which is relating to the object which is related to. And when we examine all the relationships, we see that what we relate to is constantly changing. The I is relating to several people and objects all the time, and what the I relates to is constantly changing all the time, be it the people or the objects. I see, therefore I am the seer. I speak, I am the speaker. I am a father, I am a son, I am a husband, I am a neighbor, I am a friend, I am a boss, I am an employee. And when we look at all of this, suddenly we also see, after all, even the I seems to be changing. It's not only what the I relates to, even the I seems to be changing. Even the I is not constant in every relationship. When I am the father, and then another moment I am the son. To my son, I am the father. To my father, I am the son. Now, there is a I and there is what I relate to, but I also seems to be changing. Now, when we deeply examine this further, we get to see that what we call I is a combination of two things. A combination of the role and the role player. The role keeps changing, the role player remains constant. When I am relating to my father, I am the son, I am playing the role of a son. When I am relating to my son, I am the father, I am playing the role of a father. The role player, the I, is the same. But the role that I play is always changing all the time. Now, this is where it is very important to understand when it comes to defining duty. When we say, what is my duty? What is the right thing to do? All of us have two kinds of duties: material duty and spiritual duty. Material duty and a spiritual duty. When we say, I, the role player, I have a role, I play different roles. The role that I play is my material duty. The role that I play keeps constantly changing, but I need to understand that I, the role player, I am not the role. The problem comes when the role and the role player merges and becomes one. Then the problem of the role becomes the problem of the role player and will adversely impact the performance of another role. I, the husband, when I have a quarrel with my wife, normally I don't have. When I have a quarrel with my wife and I walk out of the house and when I bang the door, the role of the husband still is there. The wife is not there, but the role of the husband is still there. And I enter the lift and I see a neighbor. Normally I smile, but now I don't, I'm grumpy. The hangover of the role of the husband still stays. And I walk into the office and I shout at my secretary. The hangover of the husband's role is still there. When the role gets merged with the role player, the problem of the role adversely impacts. It becomes the problem of the role player and it adversely impacts the performance of another role. When I understand I am the role player and every role needs to be performed according to the ordained script, when I ensure that the performance of one role does not impact the performance of another, then I can perform my duty faithful to the script. This is what Krishna calls Swadharma. When Arjuna asks, what is the right thing to do? Krishna looks at Arjuna and says, hey Arjuna, you are on the battlefield and you are a Kshatriya. What is the right thing to do? Fight the battle. You, the role of a warrior, is different from you, the role player, the Atman in you. Arjuna has got both of this mixed up. When the role and the role player gets mixed up, Arjuna thinks fighting the battle is a sin. But Arjuna had to be told, you are a warrior now on the battlefield. The role of a warrior requires that you fight. Do not mix up the role with the role player. The person is different from his personality. All the roles that we play end up creating that personality. The person is the Purusha. The personality, all the roles, the Purusha, the Atman, plays several roles through the faculty of Prakriti. The mind, the body, the mind, the intellect, all the senses, through the faculty of Prakriti, with the senses, the body, the mind, and the intellect, the Atman, the Purusha, plays several roles. But when the Purusha, the Atman, plays several roles, the role player is changeless all the time. So therefore, when we say what is the right thing to do, what is my duty, we need to perform the material duty, which is playing various roles. The role of a father, the role of a husband, the role of a son, the role of a neighbor, the role of a boss, the role of an employee, the role of a neighbor, the role of a friend. Each of these roles have an ordained script. And when I play each of these roles beautifully, faithfully, and at the same time also perform my spiritual duty, which is always trying to realize my own inherent nature. Dharma, the duty that is performed, rooted in dharma, which is knowing my essential nature. When I am rooted in the knowledge of my essential nature, that I am the Atman, I am not the body, and when I perform my dharma, which is the duty, playing various roles, and when these two are in harmony, then I do the right thing. So Arjuna's question, what is the right thing to do? The right thing to do is to harmonize these two dharmas. Dharma, that is duty, and dharma, that is my essential nature. When every action that I perform is in harmony with who I am, when every action that I perform is in harmony with my essential nature, then that action becomes the right action. When that action that I perform is in disharmony with my essential nature. What is disharmony with my essential nature? When I perform this action, misidentifying myself as the body and not the Atman, that action is a wrong action. So when we analyze the actions that we perform, we can then tick what is the right action and what is the wrong action. Possibly we will take all actions as wrong actions. As long as the misidentification persists, every action will end up to be wrong actions. Therefore, Arjuna's question in terms of, hey Krishna, what is my dharma? What is the right thing to do? What is my duty? Krishna effectively answers here, Arjuna, you need to fight. You need to do your duty. You are on the battlefield. You have a role to play, and you have to play your role beautifully. And in that process, Krishna also talks about how to align the action that you do with your own nature, essential nature. And that is where we see Krishna's exposition on Karma Yoga. And Krishna talks about the path to enlightenment. And in the process of talking about the path to enlightenment, Krishna presents a very simple formula. Gratification is only possible through renunciation. For the first time, Krishna brings in the principle of renunciation in the Gita in the 2nd chapter. And we see this principle of renunciation runs throughout the Gita until the very 18th chapter, where it becomes the very core subject of discussion. And when Krishna talks about the man, the person who practices detachment and renunciation and performs karma yoga and reaches a state of steady wisdom, then Arjuna immediately wants to know how to visualize that person of steady wisdom. How do I know when I look at someone, can I recognize if that person is rooted in a state of steady wisdom? And that is where Arjuna's second question comes up. Krishna, when he talked about a person with a steady wisdom, who is rooted in wisdom, one who has acquired knowledge, clear knowledge, Arjuna immediately asks. Now we see a different kind of Arjuna, because from the question, we can also understand Arjuna's mindset. Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kimasita prajeta kim. Now, the poet in Arjuna comes out all of a sudden. Arjuna is now talking in a poetic language that also reflects that now he is settled. He is now cool and calm, because otherwise, how can somebody come up with poetic question? A question. He was in a state of distress and grief, and now he is calm and he is able to now ask a question very poetically. Because if you look at this question, it's a very interesting way, because Arjuna wants to visualize a picture. How does this Sthita Prajna look? Sthita Prajna ka bhasha. Ka bhasha. Look, if we directly translate bhasha, we translate immediately that Sthita Prajna ka bhasha samadhisya. He says, prabhasheta. How does he talk? Ka bhasha, speak. Kimasita, Rajeta Kim, how does he sit? How does he walk? We may wonder, what is Arjuna asking here? Why does he want to know? How does a Sthita Prajna walk, talk, sit? We need to understand here the poet in Arjuna. Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha. Here, bhasha is sign, characteristic. Arjuna wants to know what are the characteristics of the person of a steady state of wisdom. Kim prabhasheta. Talking here represents responding. How does this person respond to the ups and downs of life? Kimasita. How does he sit? It's not sitting here. Kimasita, sitting here, refers to how does he restrain his senses in this world, which is filled with all kinds of temptations. How does he restrain himself? How is he able to conquer all the temptations? All the more relevant in today's context. Whether we like it or not, we are bombarded by stimuli. Therefore, how does one restrain himself? Kimasita, vrajeta kim. How does he, it's not about walking here. Walking here refers to how does he engage his senses? Kimasita, vrajeta kim. How does he conduct his life and living? So Arjuna constructs a very beautiful question that results, that triggers a wonderful response from Krishna. On Krishna then gives an exposition on the Sthita Prajna. Krishna answers each of these questions. Sthita Prajna ka bhasha. What are the signs? What are his characteristics? Krishna says the fundamental characteristic of a man with steady wisdom, fundamental characteristic is he is complete in himself. Atmanyeva atmanatushtaha. He is able to completely divert himself from all kinds of indulgences and take delight in his own self. He is one who has obtained total freedom from all kinds of emotional dependence. That is the main characteristic. One who has won complete freedom from all kinds of emotional dependence. Kim Prabhaseta, how does he respond to life's ups and downs? How does he respond? Krishna beautifully answers. The one who has obtained total freedom from all binding desires, he achieves four important things. Kamanashaha, Raganashaha, Bhayanashaha, Krodhanashaha. How does he respond to life's ups and downs? Ups and downs are unavoidable. But how does Sthita Prajna respond to these ups and downs? He responds through doing four things, accomplishing four things. Kamanashaha, Raganashaha, Bhayanashaha, Krodhanashaha. We need to understand these four are states, different states manifesting one after the other. Kama manifests before we possess an object. Before possession. The process of possession starts with kama, desire. So before possession, it is kama. The same kama transforms and manifests as raga after possession. Once we possess something, kama manifests as raga, attachment. We start developing attachment to that possession. Now, the intensity of the attachment then determines the next state. Raga manifests as bhaya, fear. The intensity of attachment directly is proportional to bhaya. Greater the intensity of attachment, greater the fear. The attachment is so strong that we are in fear of losing what we possess. Then bhaya manifests as krodha. Kama manifests as raga. Raga manifests as bhaya. Bhaya manifests as krodha. The very thought of getting separated from that possession, whatever it is, triggers anger. So therefore, Krishna answers this question. How does Sthita Prajna respond? Kim Prabhaseta, respond to ups and downs of life? Krishna says, Sthita Prajna responds by accomplishing four things. Kamanashaha, Raganashaha, Bhayanashaha, Krodhanashaha. Kimasita, how does he restrain his senses? Krishna gives the beautiful example of a tortoise and says he restrains his senses in such a way that he builds a very strong fence. Very important to have the fences strong. What is the point in complaining if there is an intruder coming into the house if the perimeter is not secured properly? Therefore, one needs to necessarily build the fences strong, make the perimeter secure so that unwanted things do not come inside. Instead of struggling to make choices amidst different kinds of temptations, Krishna says, Sthita Prajna is one who wisely chooses the right struggles. There is no point in struggling to make choices. There are so many temptations around. Therefore, one needs to choose what struggles one will engage. And one needs to necessarily avoid the avoidable dangers. So, Kim Asita, Krishna beautifully answers. And then, Kim Rajeta, Rajeta Kim. How does he engage his senses? Raga Dvesha Vyuktaihi, Krishna says. One needs to necessarily, in this world, one is constantly engaging with the world. So therefore, it is impossible not to experience the sense objects. It is okay to experience sense objects, but one needs to ensure that one does not develop strong liking and strong dislike. Aversion and like both need to be avoided. And Krishna says it is very important the way one conducts oneself, by the way one engages one's senses in this world is only possible when one has a strong purpose. The one who is powerful is one who is purposeful. One who is purposeless is powerless. One needs to necessarily have a sense of strong purpose. But again, just a sense of strong purpose alone is not enough. Because sometimes, even when that purpose is fulfilled, we are still left empty. We are still left incomplete. Now, I have the aspiration to climb up a mountain and then set up a flag on top. And then I climb up all the way. And then once I reach on the top, and I hoist the flag, and I look around. After a while, I wonder what next. As long as the purpose is disconnected from my spiritual essence, it will always leave a sense of lingering incompleteness. If my purpose is disconnected from my spiritual essence, whatever it may be, I will always feel empty, frustrated, disappointed, not content, not fulfilled. Therefore, the purposefulness should come out of our knowledge of knowing who we are. Then, it is not the fulfillment of the purpose that gives us contentment, the very purpose will give us contentment. So Krishna thus answers the fourth part of the second question of Arjuna. Kim vrajeta? How to engage? How does one with a steady state of wisdom engage in this world, engage his senses? Now, in that process, Krishna also says, hey Arjuna, you must know this. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham. He says, Apuryamanam achala pratishtham. Samudramapaha pravishanti yadvat. Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve. Sashantimapnoti nakamakami. Now, Arjuna holds on to this word, Sashantimapnoti, Sashanti. Krishna says, one should become an ocean like. When one cultivates wisdom, true wisdom, prajna, sthita prajna, steady wisdom is not just acquisition of knowledge, it is also assimilation of knowledge. Acquisition of knowledge of reality and assimilation. Jnana is like the insulation. It provides us the insulation. It is like we cannot control rains, but we can protect ourselves with a raincoat. True wisdom is when Krishna sends rain, rain becomes my choice. So sthita prajna is cultivation and assimilation of knowledge. Now in that process, Krishna says one should become ocean-like. Ocean-like. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham. An ocean is not impacted by the rivers that come and join it. There are pure rivers and impure rivers, dirty rivers and not so dirty rivers. All kinds of rivers join the ocean, but the ocean is not impacted whatsoever. It is also not impacted if a river comes and joins it or not joins it. Similarly, a man with a steady state of wisdom is not impacted by all the objects of senses all around, bombarding him all the time. He is able to conquer his desires. He has total freedom from all the binding desires. And when he has freedom from binding desires, he experiences peace. Sashantimapnoti. Immediately, Arjuna catches this word, Shanti, peace. Jayasi ched karmanaste matha buddhir janardhana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Third question of Arjuna. Arjuna's third question says, tatkim karmani ghore mam. Hey Krishna, how can you recommend that I engage in this ghastly act of war? How can you recommend? On the one hand, you're talking about peace. On the other hand, you're talking about war. How can you do this? On the one hand, you're talking about a man of steady state of wisdom, talking about a contemplative way of life and living. On the other hand, you're also talking about a life of living based on actions. How can you ask me to engage in this ghastly war? Immediately, Krishna clarifies. Arjuna is confused. When Krishna talks about peace, Krishna is talking about inner peace. Krishna is talking about how to engage in outer fighting and find inner peace within at the same time. There's no contradiction whatsoever. Only when there is inner peace, there can be outer action that can become successful. So therefore, Krishna here clarifies to Arjuna. This question of Arjuna is so very important. The third question. The third question as to, hey Krishna, when you talk about the contemplative way of life and living, the way of life and living of a man of steady state of wisdom as superior to the man of actions, why do you then ask me to engage in actions? Krishna takes an opportunity to help Arjuna reconcile these seemingly contradictory ways of life and living. Krishna talks about how one can be contemplative and meditative and at the same time also keep performing actions. And Krishna talks about actions, activity, karma, performing karma and gives Arjuna 4 different perspectives on karma. Karma as Agnya, karma as Yajna, karma for Prajna, and karma for Sarvagya. He gives 4 different dimensions to karma in response to the third question of Arjuna. Karma, Krishna talks about niyata karma. Karma is compulsory. Activity is coterminous to life and living. Whether you like it or not, Arjuna, you cannot stop acting. As long as the Atman is embodied, action, whether it is physical action or mental action, is unavoidable. So therefore, one has to necessarily keep performing action all the time. And one needs to perform actions. One needs to perform one's duty. Therefore, Krishna talks about performing karma as an agnya. He commands, hey Arjuna, you have to act. There is no escaping the fact. You cannot escape from performing your actions. You cannot escape from your duties. So the first perspective that he gives, we see how Krishna expands Arjuna's vision. Arjuna's vision is so very restrictive. He is looking at action as he's looking at his action of engaging in the war as fighting against his relatives, killing his relatives, fighting for kingdom. Krishna expands Arjuna's vision of action. He says, the real fight here, Arjuna, is fighting against your own narrow vision. And he presents karma as agya, his agya, Bhagavan's agya. One needs to act, one needs to perform one's duties. Then Krishna presents karma as yajna, the second dimension to karma. Yajnartha karmanonyatra lokoyam karmabandhanaha tadattam karma kaunteya mukta sankas samachara. Karma has to be performed as yajna. Every action has twofold results. There is a material benefit, there is a spiritual benefit. Do not focus on the material benefit. Material benefit is a byproduct. Focus on the spiritual benefit. Chitta Shuddhi. Purification of the mind. Therefore, that leads to karma for prajna, or chitta shuddhi, for purification of the mind. Only when one performs one's duties, one can purify one's mind. Without performing actions, without doing one's duty, one cannot purify one's mind. Then Krishna gives the fourth perspective. Karma, one needs to perform action for the Sarvagya. Every action has to be performed as a service to Krishna. And when that is performed, when one is in harmony with the universe and with the creator of this universe, every action that is performed becomes the right action. Therefore, Arjuna, the recommendation that I'm giving you is to perform your duty, do actions, do your duty, taking into account all the four dimensions of your action. Perform, you have to perform your action. You have to perform your action as a yajna. You have to perform action for purification. You have to perform your action as a service to Krishna. And when you do that, then you reach a state of steady wisdom and you can experience peace. Thus, Arjuna's third question is addressed by Krishna. We will continue to relish all the remaining questions of Arjuna and then eventually take up his 18th question to deep dive into the 18th chapter of the Gita. Until then, let us reflect on Arjuna's first three questions. His first question was all around Dharma. What is my essential nature and what is my essential duty? His second question was all about how do I recognize the man of wisdom? And his third question was about why should I act? Why should I engage in this duty on this battlefield? We will see how Arjuna constructs his further questions as we go along and Krishna's answers in the coming session. Krishna.